Well, hello, my name is Karleen Halleck. I am the executive pastor of Epic Church here in Mishawaka, Indiana. And I am also a registered nurse, and I'm here with three others. I'm here with Jeremy Levan, the founding pastor of Epic Church, Dr. Justin Schwalbe, who attends Epic, but is also the family doctor at South Bend Clinic. And then I'm also here with Dr. Martin Majors, who grew up in Michiana. He's a friend of Epic Church. He's traveled with Epic, and now he's a pathologist in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a partner in the IHA pathology group. And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Martin. Would you just explain what is a pathologist and what do you do?
Yeah, so we do a lot of things. Usually we spend most of our time sort of diagnosing cancer with biopsies and resections, but a big thing of what we're involved with right now is testing for infectious diseases, specifically the COVID-19 virus. So yeah, we oversee laboratories that do blood testing, and so any test is ultimately sort of under the purview of a pathologist.
Guys, I believe that most pastors and church leaders feel the weight of leading in a way that is both wise and honoring to God. And, you know, in many pastors, we feel the weight that if we don't get it right, that souls are literally at stake. It's a heavy burden to carry. And yet, as a pastor and a church leader, it can be difficult to keep up with all this information that's out there. It's difficult to know what's credible, what's not. And so I just wanted to bring some people in that are more local, guys that I trust, and that I know that have a whole lot more insight about this virus than I do. Because I believe that we can, when we have good information that we can actually trust, I believe as leaders, we can generally make good decisions. And so that's really the purpose of this conversation. And I really appreciate the both of you taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us and to share your insight with us.
Happy to be here.
Guys, I've literally heard people say that this virus and this pandemic is so overblown. And yet I was talking with someone last night that was literally wondering if this was going to be the end of the world. How serious is this pandemic? Is this something that is overblown? What are your thoughts?
It's serious. I'll just kind of step back. What is coronavirus, first of all? It's a highly contagious viral pneumonia. The world has never seen it before. It's something that our bodies don't have any antibodies to. And so we don't have any defenses against it. We've never seen it before. Unlike certain other viruses that we see seasonally, which our bodies can be like, oh, we know this, we got this. We don't. We've never seen it before. It's brand new. Nobody in the world. It's new. That's a problem. U.S. death rates predicted by the CDC is somewhere between 200,000 on the low end, 1.7 million on the high end, maybe more. I don't know. Still it changes every day. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, no, I'll echo that. I mean, worldwide, there's been over 300,000 infections. And I mean, just in my state of Michigan, you know, Karleen mentioned that I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We have over 1,000 cases in the state of Michigan. That's quickly increasing. And we have had close to 10 deaths already, which, you know, may not sound like a lot, but when you consider how quickly the incidence of infection is increasing, it's going to be a lot more deaths. And if we can't get this under control, it's going to be an even bigger problem if the healthcare system gets overwhelmed. So this is certainly not a hoax. This is something to take very seriously.
Well, with that said, I've heard people say, you know, but the flu seems more deadly than the coronavirus. I mean, so compare the differences here. I think you kind of alluded to some of that, guys, but what's more serious? Is coronavirus or the flu more serious? And, you know, unpack the differences there a little more.
So I think it is relevant to mention the flu because I think that the closest thing to sort of picture what we're going through right now is the 1918 flu pandemic, which if you look that up, you'll read that at least 20 million people worldwide died from that, and probably more than 50 million, possibly as many as 100 million people died from that. So yeah, certainly the flu is nothing to joke about. And my opinion is that people should take the flu much more seriously than they do in general. But we have vaccines for the flu. And when seasonal flu happens, we typically see cases trickle into the hospital in such a way that the hospital isn't overwhelmed. So if there is a severe case of the flu, that patient often can be treated on something like a ventilator or, whatever it is they need. Like Justin said, the coronavirus that we're encountering now is a new type of coronavirus that we've never seen before. So we have no immunity, we have no vaccine, and we have no treatment. There's some things that have been mentioned as possibilities that maybe in the future we'll be able to use, but we have no vaccine or treatment for it right now. So all that to say, although most people who get coronavirus will have mild, even asymptomatic infection, probably between 1% and 5% of people who get the coronavirus will unfortunately die. And that number may seem small, but that is 5 to 10 times what the death rate of the flu is. And the big problem that we're really trying to prevent is if the healthcare system, if the hospitals are overwhelmed and we run out of ventilators, we run out of space in the hospitals, we're not going to be able to treat these patients, and that mortality rate is going to increase even more. So all that to say, the coronavirus that we're currently dealing with certainly is, at this point at least, more deadly than the seasonal flu.
And even mortality numbers aside, more people are needing hospital beds, more people are needing ventilators, which at some point we will run out of. And that brings me back to, okay, what if I have a heart attack? What if I have a stroke? What if I just break my ankle? The hospital beds they're gone. There's no room for you. They're turning people away. That's happening in Italy. So it's scary, and it is more contagious also because when you have the flu, you're contagious when you're sick. When you feel it, you're like, oh, I don't feel good. I should probably stay away from people. It seems, everything is new. We're still figuring things out every day, but it seems like COVID-19 or coronavirus that we're talking about is more, or at least is contagious the couple days before you develop symptoms. So people are walking around feeling fine, spreading it to other people.
So I need to ask a clarifying question from you guys. As a leader, as a church leader, and I'm networked with many leaders from different parts of the country and such. And some of this is based on different states. We're told, not to meet in groups of 250 people. And then some places they say, you can meet in groups of 50 people, but no more than that. And then we're also hearing, like, don't get into groups of more than 10. And so it's a little bit confusing. So how should we go about this? What's the standard that we should follow as leaders, as we're trying to lead our churches and such? Which is it?
I tell my patients just to stay home. Don't go anywhere. If you need to go out get some groceries, do that. If you can get them delivered, it's even better. If you absolutely have to go to work, if you can't do it from home, okay. But if there's anything that's elective, anything at all, don't do it. I think if we would have gone, instead of at 250, if we would have gone right down to the stay at home, don't meet in groups at all, I think we would be so much better off if that happened.
Yeah, I mean,
behind the eight ball. Sorry.
It's exactly what Justin said. Many people who have this, at least initially, are asymptomatic. And so you can walk around, not know you have it, and pass it on to others. So, I mean, yeah, exactly. There is no safe number. If you don't have to go to work, if you don't have to go out, you should stay at home and be with your family or whatever. There's something I was going to say, and I forget what it was.
Even in groups of 10, I mean, you want to be careful because you don't know who's sick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They may not have symptoms.
So sort of stressing the point that there is no safe number. There's no reason to electively leave where you live. At the hospital where I work and at the hospitals all around the country, elective surgeries are being canceled because we don't want to bring people into the hospital that don't have to be there, potentially, just even bringing them out in public, but then even concentrating them in the hospital is a bad idea. So, I mean, it's gotten to the point where patients are even getting delayed diagnoses of cancer because, at least in the short term, for the next couple of months, we think that it's better to just keep everybody away. Chances are, if you have prostate cancer or something like that, it probably doesn't matter whether you get that or diagnosed now versus in a couple of months. What's more important is that you stay home. So the point is, if the healthcare system is canceling these things as important as surgeries and biopsies and even treatments in some cases to get people to stay home, there is really no reason to go out unless you absolutely have to for groceries or to go to work, something like that. I had to go get groceries this morning, and I tried to keep my safe distance from people, tried to only touch things I needed to. I brought Lysol wipes with me to wipe down the cart, and I even wiped down a lot of the cans and stuff I was putting in the cart. But the reality is, there's probably somebody in that grocery store that has the virus, and either they don't know or they didn't feel well and they still made the decision to go out because they need that paycheck or they need that food for their family. I may have, walked near them, or they may have touched the food that I ended up picking up. It's very dangerous to go out, and it's really better just to stay in at this point.
So along those same lines, I heard you guys actually talking about work and going to work. We have Christian business leaders that are in our churches. What do you say as we try to influence them? What would you say even to businesses that are non-essential to combating this virus? I mean, that's a hard thing to wrestle with, but what would you say to them?
It's hard. I've had these conversations time and again, and it's I'm the one taking phone calls and saying, listen, you might have COVID-19, you might have coronavirus. You got to stay home. And they say, well, what about my paycheck? I need to, and I say, I'm really sorry. It's for your good. It's for everybody's good that you stay home. And that's the hardest decision. That's the hardest thing to say is, no, stay home. Don't get your paycheck. I've had to say it a lot lately.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's hard. It's hard to make the economy basically grind to a halt, right? And like I said, what we spend most of our time doing is diagnosing cancer on biopsies and resections, that kind of thing. And so, this actually really hits home for me. Like, we're not getting the specimens that we need to sort of have the revenue in our department to keep sort of our business going. But at the same time, I totally understand. I'm totally on board with having people stay home and not go out. So, I have skin in the game too. It's not like I'm sitting here telling people to stay home, and not having it affect me. It affects us too.
Me too. I'm usually pretty busy. I see about 20 some a day, and tomorrow on my schedule I have about 5. So people are not coming in largely because they don't want to, largely because I'm trying to get them in either later or just refill their meds without seeing them, which I don't love, but I think it's the safest thing to do. So, us docs are making the sacrifices big time too. It's hard.
Yeah. Can one of you address just even the statistic of a person that is infected with COVID-19 and how many people potentially they do infect when they themselves have the virus, and how quickly that spreads to others?
You might have a better idea of specific numbers. The models I've seen is, the average person may infect 2 to 3 people. And I'm not entirely sure what that data was based on. So Justin may be able to reference something better, but from what I've seen, it's probably not as infectious as something like say measles, but it certainly is infectious, and you are very likely to pass it on to others if you have it.
Yeah, I think what that number is, it's a R with a 0, R naught. And in the flu, it's somewhere around like 1.3. So if I have the flu, just in daily life, I'm expected to infect 1.3 people through my illness, with COVID-19 and 2 to 3 people. So I mean, that's where this exponential growth happens, because if I infect 2 to 3 people, then they infect 2 to 3 people, it explodes.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I saw just recently that Indiana's governor announced that students are going to be out of school and remain with e-learning until at least May 1st. And yet, as I'm talking to different church leaders across this area and even across the nation, some of them are saying, we're going to make the decision not to meet one Sunday at a time, because several of them are hoping that they'll be able to gather back together with their church families by Easter Sunday, or hopefully before that. But what do you think? Is that even realistic, or do we think that that's giving false hope?
I personally think Easter Sunday is wishful thinking. I think probably looking at May might be a more reasonable goal. I know for my church, I believe we've canceled at least for the next month, which I'm fine with. If they want to take it a few weeks at a time, I think that's reasonable. But I think the leadership in the church that I attend is taking it very seriously, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, I think we just have to say this is going to be a while and be ready for it and prepare.
Wow. And I know many people in our society are practicing social distancing, and they are staying in their homes. And yet I still have individuals that say, so if everyone else is practicing social distancing, is it really that big of a deal if I don't? And what if it's just with a few of my friends or a few of my neighbors, or maybe some of my extended family? What would you say to those individuals?
Well, I think of a news story I heard on the radio driving into work. There was a lady whose husband tested positive for COVID, and she felt fine. She was good. She said, I don't need to cancel my plans. I'm going to go out with my lady friends. She had 3 or 4 lady friends that she went out with for like a lunch. She recounted she did not sneeze on them. She did not touch their plates or even get close to them. They were just at the same table. And then she found out that she turned positive. And later on, she contacted those people, and they went and got tested. And at least one of them, I don't remember exactly how many, but at least one of them also became positive. So that just goes to say how quickly it spreads.
Wow. And I know that there are more and more people that are getting tested, and yet it's taking longer for the results to come back from the test. And so let's just say if I live in a household with someone who has gotten tested, but we're waiting for the results, is it that big of a deal if I go out into the public, even if I'm feeling fine to get groceries or get prescriptions or go to work? If I have someone in my home that has gotten tested, what do we as a household do? What would be your recommendation?
I think the guidance that my healthcare organization is giving is that if you live in a household where somebody tests positive, you should assume that you are positive as well, and quarantine yourself appropriately
until they come back negative, or
Okay. Yeah.
So no going and get groceries is what you're saying.
Right. Call someone else.
So say I test positive, and my wife, a day later tests negative. That doesn't necessarily mean that she's not going to get it. She should, I should quarantine myself from her as much as possible, but she still needs to be careful because, no test is perfect. So in laboratory testing, there's something called a false negative. And what that means is that you might actually have the virus or whatever the test is testing for, but for whatever reason, maybe it was in a low number, or maybe the test just got sort of screwy. The test came back negative. So that's called a false negative, where the test is negative, but you're actually positive. And then the other thing to be aware of, if I'm in this house and I'm positive, and Ashley is initially negative. Maybe if she got tested 2 days later, she would have been positive. So it's, I think if you are living with somebody who tests positive, you need to be extremely careful about what you do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And with that, I actually even just got that question today that, so if someone does test positive, how long until they're no longer contagious?
I don't know that answer, to be honest.
I mean, like Justin said earlier, this is a new virus that we've never encountered before, and so all of this data we're sort of, getting on the fly as we go. I think what my healthcare organization is recommending is that if you test positive, um, you quarantine yourself for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Until the end of so I guess after you stop having symptoms 2 weeks later, I think you can be confident that you are probably okay.
Mhm. And so what I'm hearing is even if they start to feel better, less than 2 weeks after they test positive, they need to stay quarantined for the full 2 weeks because they could potentially still be spreading the virus. So it's less about how they feel within those 2 weeks and more about making sure that they actually quarantine for a full 14 days is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, just to be really safe.
Mm-hmm. So along those lines, I mean, we've heard that those who are in the older population are those who are most vulnerable and the ones who are most at risk, but has that changed? And is it true that now younger people can also be at risk for this virus? And if that's true, how serious is that risk?
I don't know if it's the difference in populations of different countries or just testing differently, but it seems to have changed since we first heard about it, and it does seem like younger people are getting more ill in a higher percentage.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the people who unfortunately develop severe infection or pass away will be older people with coexisting medical problems. But I think to assume that because you are young, you will be safe is wrong. And yeah, like Justin said, I think we are seeing data now that young people are getting infected and more severely ill than you might otherwise expect with something like the seasonal flu. It's interesting with the 1918 flu pandemic, that really had a devastating effect on people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, sort of younger than you would typically expect. It really sort of decimated that population, and hopefully this pandemic doesn't get that bad, but young people need to be very careful. It's been very sobering for me. I'm on Twitter for professional reasons, and I think what really got my attention with this was when I started seeing posts about young, people in their 30s and 40s getting this and dying. Um, it's not safe to assume that this is just going to be older people who are severely affected by this.
So, guys, you had mentioned that we got to be careful about not overrunning the hospitals and the ICUs here in our country, and more people are getting sick. Realistically, are we doing well with this? Are we on pace to not do this, or how soon could we be looking to overrun the hospitals and ICU? Where are we at in all of this?
Well, if you look at data coming from Italy and you kind of track where we are based on them, uh, we're we're behind them in terms of when we first had the same number of like 100 infections in the country, but we are like at pace with them. We're pretty much right on the same course, which is scary. We have a different population, but that still is not a good sign.
Yeah, I'll second that totally. And so there's a website that tracks the number of new cases and deaths relatively well. And if you look at that, it shows that yesterday, New York had about 10,000 cases. And today, New York has about 16,000 cases. That is 5,000 to 6,000 more cases in New York in one day. And if you look at yesterday, New York had 56 total deaths, and today they have 114. That doubled since yesterday. Sobering.
Yeah. And the other thing is, a lot of the data we're having on just sheer numbers is lagging behind. I don't know about like New York or other labs, but our lab, it's taking like a week at this point to get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So all the data we have is like 7 days old at this point, and we're on, I think, like day 13 in total. So I mean, yeah, it just gives me chills.
The laboratory testing for this has been just very bad. I'll second that. You know, on Friday, I took a call from a clinician who was wondering where the results of their COVID test in a couple of patients were, and I looked into it, and it had been a week since the specimen was sent to the lab, and the result still wasn't back yet.
I wonder if that was me calling you.
Yeah. I think that labs are starting to try and catch up a little bit, but we were so far behind the 8 ball on this that it's just like it's difficult to catch back up once you get behind on testing. So I'll tell you, one of the major reference laboratories in the US that is doing a lot of the testing, it should be a 24-hour turnaround time for this test, but they are getting so inundated with samples that it's now a 5 or 6 day turnaround. And so some labs are starting to try and develop an in-house test. So for example, the University of Michigan has developed an in-house test, but even then it's difficult to sort of ramp that up to where you need to be able to test hundreds, if not thousands of samples a day. And another issue with testing is, you know, it's not that difficult to theoretically come up with a test for something like this. It's more difficult to get clearance and prove that it works and all of that. But something that most people wouldn't really think of is sort of the material that is required for testing. So what's called viral transport media. So the test for COVID typically is a swab that goes up your nose, and then it gets stuck in a little tube and sent to the lab. And the reality is we don't have enough of those testing kits, that transport media to do the test, even if the tests were able to be performed in a timely manner. So, you know, just what Justin said, the testing for this is really lagging. And I saw a tweet that was kind of a joke, but it's kind of a sad reality that if you want to be tested for this in the US and get a timely result, the best thing to do is probably cough in the face of a rich or famous person, because somehow those people are able to get tested quickly, but the average person is not. So it's very sobering, I think.
It sounds like we're on old data, and it's probably far more serious, far more people infected than we clearly realize. So, yeah.
I guess I asked the question then, as pastors and church leaders, how dangerous is it if we encourage our people to meet together, even if it's in small groups, like 10 people per group or less than that? I mean, are we really putting people at risk? I'm hearing the numbers that you're saying, but are we still actually putting people at risk? I'm getting those questions from individuals, and so I want you to be able to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can say it's safe to do that. Like we alluded to earlier, it seems to be more contagious before symptoms start. So you don't know you're sick. So how do you know you're not contagious, right? You can't rely on there being a cough or a fever to say, I'm going to stay home. The cough or fever might happen 2 or 3 days later, and you were just at someone's house, touching all their stuff. Sure, you wipe down the tables and everything, but it's just impossible to get everything. We keep telling people, wash your hands, don't touch your face. While we were talking and before we started videotaping and up until this point, I've been keeping track how many times everybody touched their face. Jeremy, you did it 4 times. Karleen, once. Martin 5 times and myself 5 times. So I guess doctors were the worst. But but it's each of those times we touched our face is the virus potentially going from a surface to our face into our body. And when you're with people eating and hanging out, I mean, how do you not touch your face? I mean, this is going to happen. So no, there you go. Hand me some of that, okay?
Yeah, I mean, there really is no safe number.
Make that 6.
there really is no safe number to be meeting in, which
No.
We're just beating a dead horse at this point. And frankly, like we live in an age of technology that's available to us. We're doing this call on a computer. You can leverage technology in such a way that you don't need to be meeting in person to have social connections and fellowship and things like that. The church that I'm a part of, after the sermon was streamed on Facebook today, on Zoom, there was like a fellowship gathering where anybody who wanted to could pop on and just chat and hang out. And it's obviously different than seeing somebody in person. You can't hug them. Maybe you can't sort of provide the comfort that you normally would otherwise. But and obviously technology isn't available to everyone. One of my really good friends works at a church in a relatively large city, and the church serves people in a lower socioeconomic status. And those people rely on the church for things like food and shelter and clothing and stuff like that. And so, I asked him, like, what are you guys doing? Like, I mean, obviously you're a smart guy. Like, I know that you know what these recommendations are, that people shouldn't be meeting, but your members rely on you guys for food and necessary things like that. And they made the difficult choice to not meet. And they're trying to provide food and things like that in other ways. And, I think if a church like that, that really provides such a vital thing for its community, can make the decision not to meet in person, there's no reason why my church would meet.
Yeah, I agree.
Guys, in the history of pandemics, we often would see the church step up and help make a difference. And so with that in mind, as we think of where we're at today, what are some ways that we can partner with the medical community to help make a difference in this season of uncertainty that we're living in right now?
So the first thing I would say, one aspect of pathology is something called transfusion medicine or blood banking. And that's the part of the hospital that stores all of the blood and dispenses it to the clinicians and surgeons as they feel like their patients need it. And we're always battling low blood supplies. When I was in residency, when we were on call, we would get multiple pages every night with clinicians needing blood products in the lab, trying to sort of ration them so that the patients who really needed the blood would get the right blood at the right time. And with everything that's going on, blood donation has really decreased, and we're really facing a shortage of blood supplies. So, if you're feeling healthy, I would really encourage you to make a blood donation. Number one, you will save lives. Number two, it is, in my opinion, aside from perhaps work, the only valid reason to get out of the house and go somewhere. And so if you go to redcross.org, you can schedule a blood donation there. And if you're concerned about going there and getting infected, when I donated blood last week, I'll tell you the experience I had. I walked in, they took my temperature, they made me wash my hands. There was a big waiting area where people could space themselves out appropriately. So these places are taking appropriate precautions to keep you safe when you go. So all that to say, I think a very tangible way to sort of love your community is to donate blood if you're able to.
Yeah. I'm planning to donate on Tuesday, so now I have to do it now that I said it. Other things, I mean, you can be doing is, we know that there's a shortage of PPE or the masks, the gowns, things like that. There's been a big social media thing about helping to make masks, and well, I hope I never have to use one. It's going to be better than a bandana or a scarf. CDC just said if we run out of masks, which we're probably going to do, then they say it's okay to use a bandana or a scarf. So if you have a sewing kit, sewing needle, I don't know, machine, and you can get some of those supplies, if you already have them, you can make some masks that would help. You can donate those to the local hospital, something like that. Checking on your neighbors, we call it social distancing, but we were talking about it earlier, like it really should be called physical distancing, and I really like that a lot better. So you can still be social, you can still check on your neighbors, call them, send them a text. Hey, do you need me to pick anything up? I'm getting a grocery order to be delivered. I can grab a couple extra things for you. Do we need to do that for you? Also, as I was brainstorming, another thing is just like helping as a church leader to help make sure your church is ready should there be a need, an influx of, hey, there's no more beds, there's no more rooms, can we use your church? And that's a very possible need.
Yeah, it's just echoing what Justin said. It's been sort of interesting. I think my wife and I have noticed that we're actually in a way being more intentional about connecting with people with this. We our church small group. One of the things that we've done is we created a like video chat or FaceTime schedule where every couple of nights, 2 of the families in the small group will FaceTime each other and sort of catch up.
That's cool.
So, we caught up with some people this week that we otherwise, wouldn't have thought to connect with them on that night. It's okay to get outside and get a little bit of exercise. And so we've been trying to go for walks when it's nice in the afternoon. And when we run into our neighbors and, keep appropriate distance, it's been really nice to sort of like really value that time that we see somebody and can talk to them and sort of check up on that. And I think most times we take that for granted and really don't put a value on that.
Thank you for sharing those practical ways. Go ahead, Justin.
No, I was going to say I agree. I'm an introvert by nature, but I found that the times that I get to do stuff like this, or we're doing various different Zoom things, that this has been a really life that this fills me up. I'm like, oh, this is good. I really like this. So there's ways to still help by staying home, and that's probably the thing that helps us the most as doctors, is to just stay home. There was a meme I saw. It's like, never in the world have we been called on to save the world by sitting and watching TV on our couch. Let's not screw this up. That is so true. Like, stay home. Screen time for the win. Okay.
Both of you have provided just some really practical things that individuals can do. But I know that one thing that can be really hard for pastors of local churches is, you don't want to be the only person that's making a hard decision that could potentially be seen as hurting the church, because it can look like it's based out of fear. And yet, on the other hand, there's this tendency to maybe over spiritualize boldness. And so many local churches, they're part of denominations or networks. So what type of action and responsibility do you think that denominational leaders need to take during the season that we find ourselves in?
We've been hearing news. We heard the front lines. So China first, then Italy, now New York, and Washington. We're hearing reports from the front lines saying, this is not good. We need to take it seriously. And it hurts me as a physician to see people not take it seriously, especially my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, where I'm realizing that they're putting me at risk by not taking it seriously. So I know it's not the popular opinion sometimes, but they need to be the ones who are willing to stand up and say, listen, this is what the people who are out there are saying. We need to do what they're saying. We need to back up the medical community. We need to keep them safe so they can do their job.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I have little confidence that a church pastor is going to listen to what I say, but they'll probably listen to what their denominational leader says. So I would really encourage those leaders to set an example and really have people not congregate together, really leverage technology to sort of do church that way whenever possible, and just stay home.
Great. Well, guys, I really appreciate your time. And I just want to, as we close out our time here, I just want to share this. You know, the other day I shared a post about church leaders that in South Korea, and now they're under tremendous scrutiny because they chose to continue to meet in person in the midst of the corona crisis. And I recently saw a governor in our own country that has begun pointing fingers at churches that are continuing to meet in person. Albeit, you know, it seems like he was speaking to those that are meeting in larger group gatherings. And the CDC is recommending that we don't meet in non-essential meetings of more than 10 people. And so, you know, as we've just heard from you guys and really most within the medical community that we've talked with, they're asking that we not meet in person at all. And so to my brothers and sisters in Christ that are listening to this, I want to encourage you, especially those that are church leaders, to consider this and to ask, how can we prayerfully become more creative? How can we do more to help our communities? If you're like me, your head is spinning as a result of this situation. You know, this situation continues to evolve and deteriorate, and our plans and our responses, I mean, they're literally changing by the day and even by the hour at times. But what seems like a great idea a few days ago may not be the best idea today. And so church leaders and pastors, I want to encourage you to consider this season that we're in and to try and keep ahead as best as possible. And I know that this is grueling. I know this is tough to lead through. And if you're like me, you're working on little sleep, but you're really praying a lot to try to have wisdom and ask God to help you know how to adapt. You know, at this point, most of our society has moved or will move to more of physical distancing. And this includes our schools, our local restaurants, non-essential businesses. And some states right now are in complete stay-at-home mandates. So this begs the question as church leaders for us to pivot again and to think about ways that we can still love our congregation and love our community while simultaneously promoting the utmost safety. And so my prayer and my heart is that as Christ followers, we won't be seen as a detriment and an easy target for expediting the loss of life during this pandemic, but that we would be seen as a loving front line of defense to help make a difference, to help slow down and ultimately defeat this insidious virus. And you know, with God's help, I think together we could help make this happen.
Yeah. Jerry, I just wanted to share one last quote that I was reading just before coming here. And I guess I'm just going to read it because it really got to me with what you're saying too, and it really hit home. So it goes like this: in Italy, 8.3% of coronavirus cases involve health workers. The doctor in the Seattle area who is forced to reuse N95 masks told me that she and her colleagues fear the lack of supplies will be deadly. And I've got 3 girls, so this is the part that really struck home. We are all making dying contingency plans at this point, just in case, she said. Wills, backup people to take care of the kids, and recording bedtime stories. Serious.
Hard to imagine. And Justin and Martin, man, I am so thankful for you guys, and I'm grateful for what you guys are doing, and that you guys are out there, you know, doing this to make a difference. And it's about saving lives. And so may we do our part to join with you guys to help save lives and to love our community well, and to not unnecessarily put people like yourselves at risk, as well as our other brothers and sisters in Christ, as well as our neighbors and other family members. And so let's all do our part. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks. My pleasure.